Welcome to Content Disrupted, bold takes on brand marketing. I'm your host, Dan Baptiste, and together we'll explore what it takes to excel in brand marketing at one of the most exciting and disruptive times in industry history. Welcome to Content Disrupted. Joining us today is Jeff Fleischman, Chief Marketing Officer at Altimetrik. Altimetrik focuses on helping businesses accelerate growth and achieve their goals through digital and cultural transformation, including AI adoption. Lots to dig into there, Jeff. Speaking of transformation, Jeff has 30 plus years in leadership roles at major brands such as Citi, American Express, Monster.com, Penn Mutual, and more, where he's helped drive change within these organizations at pivotal moments by leaning into modern tech along with customer-centric strategies. I'm excited to dive into Jeff's playbook for success and talk about how we apply it in today's crazy environment. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan, and thanks for that wonderful introduction and reminding me how old I am.
Listen, it's called experience, right? So, Jeff, I'd love to start here, where we look at all of the brands you've worked on, and throughout your career, it seems like you're drawn to these big challenges. So, driving change in the face of uncertainty. So, one, why is that? Why do you kind of sign up for that? And what gives you the ability and the confidence to lead organizations through these moments?
Yeah, so great question. I like challenges. It's funny if you tell me, and even as a kid, if you told me I can't do something, I did it. And when I started working, I took on some challenges. And when I was the kid on the new kid on the block, I was starting to use technology. At the time, IBM computers. And I would do what today would be rudimentary things, right? And people looked at me like I was some sort of rocket scientist. And I think I was on that wave where I could leverage technology to accelerate productivity, improve outcomes, and really, drive a business forward in terms of solving for some sort of challenge. And so that was the start. I've never been afraid to take on a challenge. I've always said to myself that I have this mountain to climb, and I'll get there. I'll climb to the top, and then I'll climb the next peak to the next peak, and so on and so forth. So I would say the other half to this is that, it's no fun doing something that's simple and easy. Sometimes you might double guess, second question yourself on whether or not you made the right choice. Did I take on too much? But I do think it's rewarding. And I believe in self-improvement and growing in terms of your career growth. And you can't do that by taking the easy path. And you learn a lot more from your mistakes than you do from what you do right. And it makes you a better, stronger leader. And so that was my mantra. And I kind of stuck to that blueprint. And, when people threw stuff at me, I was glad to take it on and try to, excel.
Awesome. And I mentioned the impressive roster of brands that you've put your stamp on, helping lead Amex through a digital first transformation in late 90s, early 2000, and replicating that success in multiple other brands, and thinking of how you run to those challenges and climb those mountains over and over again. Were all these stops unique, or as you look at, is there a framework or an approach when you look at a problem like that and you start to simplify the world and see commonalities across each of those situations?
I would say early in my career, I worked really hard. I was given something, I ran with it. And early at JP Morgan, which was Chase Manhattan at the time, because I was successful and I was able to get stuff done, people tapped me on the shoulder and said, "This is your next job." I literally did not interview for jobs at Chase. They kind of hand selected me and moved me on. And I remember one time getting an offer from a prior boss, moving into a new business. He said, "Why don't you come in?" And I said, "I know nothing about this business." And he said, "You'll come in and you'll do your magic and you'll be successful," which, was a great vote of confidence in my abilities. And then as I started to get more mid-career and upper career, it becomes more of a equation of how do you find the right spot? How do you pick the right challenge? Because at those inflection points, the decisions become critical. You're making decisions that probably will influence your career, if not for the next, 1 to 5 years, it could be the rest of your career. So I made some pivotal changes. As an example, I was a finance risk guy. I mean, I did operations, I did customer service type work. I worked at American Express, unbelievably good company. I was in risk management. My boss came into my office and he said, Jeff, you're now in charge of the web for risk management. Now, this is back in the late 90s. AOL was the hot property. We had American Express as a keyword in AOL. We didn't even have a website. And I thought they were chat rooms. That's what I thought online AOL. People would go into chat rooms and they chat or try to date or whatever the case may be. So he left my office. He said, "You'll figure it out." And I took it one step at a time, and slowly I got it right. And the web became, to me, unbelievable opportunity to help transform American Express. And within a year or so, they did a consolidation of all the web teams into one group. So I went from being a risk management and operations focus to the entire U.S. Series of businesses: consumer, corporate services, merchant. Every business in the US was now consolidated under me. And that completely revamped my perspective and opened my eyes up in terms of how do you build engaging experiences and drive economic value. In addition to driving productivity, improving operational, excellence, and Amex very focused on customer service. And when I took over these challenges on the website, we would start to move stuff to the web and we'd look at these experiences and say, this can't be how it works. This is American Express. There were so many gaps. And what we did through the web channel is we fixed all what I would call the black holes in the experience. And then we took it, the tech team took it and moved it back into the customer service group. So we would literally, at the end of a few years, have one process, one platform to do certain types of tasks. And the latency that you would see offline went away because we had built it online. So that was an eye opener for me. We were very successful. The web channel became the single largest customer facing channel in all of American Express. And it was one of the few experiences I had where we would build certain things and they would come. So we built certain membership reward activities or capabilities on the web. And we would literally see, 30, 60% penetration within a few months, online versus offline. So that whole experience changed the course of what I was doing. I went from a finance risk person into the web marketing experience roles. And that's where I've been ever since.
That's interesting. I hadn't in just looking at your background, I hadn't noticed that you kind of like almost fell into marketing. And are you happy that happened? Do you wish you were in risk management still? Or, because it sounds like, as you organically grew, you almost didn't have a choice.
Yes and no. I would say I'm happy I made the change. I was able to actually, based on working for American Express, and by the way, they allowed us to be successful, right? They gave you the tools, you had to, prove yourself. And even when it came to budget time, you had to be very clear what you're going to do, why you're doing it, and what you're going to get for that. And my finance risk background was very helpful. Even today, when I think about marketing, I always think about what's my ROI? How am I going to measure this? How am I going to go request money to do something and prove that I have the business case? Because a lot of times marketers don't have that background and don't have that advantage. So I bring the finance background to my marketing skills. And why I said yes, no, it depends what company you work for. Some companies support marketing and treat it as either a strategic imperative or a strategic internal partner to the business. And some companies treat it like a support group. I hate using the word support group, but that's what they treat it. So if you find the right niche as a marketer, it could be very rewarding. And if you find yourself in a culture where marketing is kind of pushed to the side, it becomes very challenging and very difficult to operate. And so I've seen both. I much prefer the ones where it's more inviting and more acceptable in terms of how marketing is viewed as a strategic asset. And if not, it's like I said before, you're going to have a tough time because every dollar you try to get in terms of funding will be questioned. Sometimes marketing can be um, quantifiable and sometimes it's qualitative. So, a lot of brand measurement, you can measure some brand metrics, but a lot of it can be qualitative. So it's soft. But in terms of lead generation, in terms of, building a website, In terms of doing things where you can demonstrate an ROI, to me, that's what I want to be focused on. And the other big change that's happened since I started in marketing is that it's very technology and data focused. It's completely transformed to now you can market to audiences of one if you'd like. You could be very specific in who you target, how you target, where you target, and everything is measurable. So in the old days, you'd throw stuff out there, and 3 months, 6 months later, you'd get some indication of how a campaign performed. Now you can read in real time. You can do A/B testing, multivariate testing in real time, and you can tweak your strategies much more dynamically than you could in the past. So to me, marketing is a lot more like rocket science than it's ever.
Jeff, I want to kind of poke at that because I'm reconciling a few thoughts that you just shared. One is there's a lot of elements of marketing that are really important from qualitative and quantitative. When you think of what you just said, which is now we can personalize and get access to metrics instantly, does that help or hurt in an environment where every dollar is attributed to some sort of ROI metric when to your point earlier, maybe it shouldn't be. Like, is that, how do we reconcile that kind of friction?
Yeah, good question. I think it's incredibly important to be able to quantify what you're doing. If you sit down every planning season, everyone sits down, I go through a bottoms up marketing plan, and everything has what are we doing, why, and what do we expect to get. Most things can be measured. Lead gen, social media, website, all that stuff can be measured. When you get to the brand side of the equation, that becomes a bit more challenging because you have things to measure that might be more like a survey. Do you recognize the brand? You give unaided or aided, your recognition of the brand. That becomes very soft. I would say that the type of marketing that I'm most interested in is the type that can be measured. And we talked about it earlier. I'll take the challenge. I'll lay out a business case, and my expectation is that if I can deliver, I want more money. And if I can't deliver, we have to be very. Failing is not terrible, right? Especially if you're in an environment where they allow you to fail, but sunset quickly. So if something's not working, don't let it drag on, and don't waste money. Sometimes you have to pull the plug. You did everything the right way. Results aren't what they should. Stop it and move on to the next thing. So I would say if you are in marketing, quantify, quantify, quantify. And these days, there's not much you can't quantify. If you do that, you build credibility with your business partners because you align your goals to what their goals are, right? Why am I doing lead gen? I'm trying to bring in new business, right? No business leader is going to say, don't bring in new business, or help me grow the wallet share by using the tools and techniques that you can do to increase my visibility within an existing client. So those things become really important. They build credibility. And when you sit down with the CFO, it's interesting. I've sat down with very senior executives, CFOs and CEOs when I've done my plan. And I think the bar was low when I walked in because this is marketing. And I walk in with a water flow chart to show here's my beginning point this year. I subtract out what I'm stopping. I come up with my new baseline for next year, and here's what I'm adding in. And it's all quantified. There's a reason why I'm doing things, and it works out really well. It builds credibility. It doesn't mean you're going to get your budget. Doesn't mean people start to believe in marketing, but no one can dispute the fact that you have a game plan. You have outcomes that you expect to get. And I'll bet, I'll put a wager on the fact that we could drive those outcomes. And if we can't, then we'll move on. We'll stop what doesn't work and we'll move on, figure something new out.
And when you look at your business case, when you're going to ask for money, what are some of the core elements that you put in there that maybe other marketers don't really think about given your financial and your risk background?
Yeah, I would say it's creating the P&L and creating. You can say, well, I'm going to grow my new, let's say, acquisition. I'll get acquisition numbers from 10 to 20, and that's okay. It's base stats. But what is that increase in business going to look like to the bottom line? So you're bringing in X number of new clients. What's the revenue look like? What's the opportunity to grow the revenue beyond that look like? So it's a longer term perspective on value. And where there's this value, if you take in all the components, how do you create a robust perspective of what this value can be to the company? It's beyond just the marketing achievement of landing an account or getting more followers. What's the next two or three things that matter in terms of you put a client on the books? How does that client perform? Can you grow that client? Can you find other clients just like that one and bring the same model and technique or tools or angle to get those prospects to become clients? So, you find the lookalikes and you try to replicate that. And also you learn from what's not working. If something's falling short, why? I always want to do a postmortem on what's working and what's not working. And you're constantly tweaking. Marketing it's not an end state, right? It's a continuous process to find a better way of doing something, to create more value. And I would stress building the right partnerships within the company because you need advocates. A lot of marketers don't have advocates inside the company. It could be a variety of reasons. It could be culture, it could be working relationship, it could be style. But I've always been a bridge builder in any job. Even when I was in finance, I would reach across and try to understand why people are trying to make the investments and what can we expect to get for it. Because as a CFO, that was my responsibility to understand return. So being on both sides of the equation, building those bridges become a very important aspect of being a marketer, and being able to partner and bring people with you is important. And if you bring them, they're going to actually start picking up the phone and calling you more and relying on you more as a partner to help them grow the business.
So strategically partnering with folks internally to drive business outcomes versus chase marketing tactics. I think that's a great reminder. Obviously, you can't be successful on your own when you're trying to solve a business challenge with marketing. You need to kind of work together. That makes a whole lot of sense, and it's a great reminder. Tell me about your role at Altimetric. So you've been there for about 6 years. You mentioned kind of coming in cold with the business case at the beginning. What have you accomplished over that time, and what's the next wave of things you're focusing on?
So I'd say coming in, I had a very small team. They were good, but I think the broader strategic perspective around marketing wasn't quite where it needed to be. So we focused the group across a couple of core areas. I won't cover all of them, but lead generation, social media, PR, internal communications, things like awards and recognition. Those were the core areas that we wanted to focus on. And I would say in my first probably year or so, what I said, I created a pyramid and did a presentation and said, we're going to focus on building the basics. Some were there, some weren't. Second stage of the pyramid was getting to parity. And the third was real acceleration. That's where you get into the lead gen and really becoming smart. So we put a plan together. We delivered. When I started here, we had 19,000 LinkedIn followers. And now globally, we're probably at about closing in on 300,000. And we did that through content creation. So content became, I'd call it the connective tissue. Without good content, you can't start to drive engagement. And while we're not as big as some of the huge companies out there in terms of our followers, we have at least 4 to 5 times the engagement rates of our competitors. That's because the content is meaningful and it's relatable. So that's really been good. On the PR side, we had no PR. We started to work with a PR company. Now we have three across the globe because we're a global company. So we're focused in Europe, in Asia, APAC, and in the US. We probably pick up about 100, 150 pieces of coverage a year. Those could be authored articles, interviews, videos. We also started to expand into conferences to build our brand. Brand building is very important. Altimetric created what we like to think of as, or what we like to refer to as a digital business methodology. So if you think about software development, DevOps transforms software development. Our digital business methodology is transforming how companies do digital business. That's AI, data, DevOps, cloud migration, platform modernization, everything companies are focused on today to increase, their business, grow their business, do it at scale, and try to break down the legacy barriers and complexities that they face. That's more of an overview of the digital business methodology. And we have to take that and we have to globalize that and for people to understand what really makes that different. And so we wrote a couple of books. We go to conferences like Money 2020. We go to Snowflake, Dreamforce. We also, on occasion, apply for awards. So the company has won innovation awards, they've won technology awards. We have a great culture. Many of our markets have won great places to work, and that's a credit to the people and the culture of Altimetric. So we took a broad perspective along those domains and also built internal strategic communication so that we speak with one voice. So it's not only important that the brand and the communications is done um, consistently across the globe externally, but internally as well, because every one of our employees is a brand ambassador. So those were I know I jumped around a bit, but those were the core areas that we focused on, and we've seen success. But we're still a small marketing team. We're now focused on building lead gen capabilities, which we did over the last few years. We're bringing in leads and marketing qualified leads. We get them in sales qualified leads. Converted a few, not as many as I'd hoped, but we're continuing to bring in good leads and figuring out what's that magic and sauce or ingredient to close on more deals. Where we're going is AI. The whole world is going AI. I would say that we use AI in our create. I have a creative team. They're using AI there. I use Gen AI every day, both personally and professionally. And we're starting to build out internally a lead gen capability leveraging AI, something that we can actually market more broadly out there to clients at some point down the road. So AI has been a game changer. And if people aren't using AI, don't be afraid of it, and adopt it and embrace it and figure it, just like the web. I said the same exact words about the web when the web started. Do not be afraid of the web. The web is not your enemy. AI isn't. I will tell you a couple of things I personally use for AI. So if I write a blog or I write content, I'll use AI to validate my position, either for or against. So I let it challenge me a bit in my perspective, where it's really powerful. Its ability to find research that supports a position. So if I write a blog on platform modernization or AI, I'll ask it for research that supports this. And it will spit back at me research, high quality research from, big name companies that actually dovetail nicely into what I'm writing about. That used to take hours of work. I also put together some research on market sizings by the type of work we do: platform modernization, AI. Where's it going over the next 3 to 5 years? And then I broke it down by industry. So there were 5 or 6 core technology areas I focused on. Then I broke it down by the 4 or 5 core industry groups that we're in. And I created this matrix. And that research to get the market sizings would have taken me months. And maybe I'm over exaggerating. It would have felt like months, but it would have been very painful and hard to put together. I did it probably in 2 hours. And the reason why it took 2 hours is because when you prompt AI, you have to ask it the right question. Even when it was starting to format tables for me, it would change the formatting of the table on its own. And I'd have to go back and say, don't change the table, leave the table as it is, just bring in the industries. And it's just a phenomenal tool. And I look at it as not a replacement of, but it actually supplements what you can do. So, for instance, I write a blog and then I can tell it, I want to write LinkedIn posts. I want 3 LinkedIn posts and I want one poll for LinkedIn. And it will do it in minutes, not in seconds, it feels like. And it puts together content that you'd probably get to at some point, but it just increases the speed. So, people went from using calculators to using Excel, and that was a quantum leap in your productivity and ability to do things and measure, especially as a finance guy. That was a huge jump for me. And I would look at this analogy to AI is that it's not a replacement of what you do, it's an enhancement to how you do it. You embrace that, it's going to dramatically change how you operate. You'll be able to think more from the neck up and be more of a strategist than sitting down at a computer and literally cranking out numbers or trying to put files together or trying to do research. The busy work gets done so you can focus on the thinking part of the job. So if anyone has any doubts about it and they're listening to this podcast, test it out. I even use it in my personal life.
Yeah, I mean, I think you get into a really important point there. And your first point dovetailed into the AI, which is the importance of thought leadership and having something to say. How do we build a really thought provoking sort of global platform in your case, where you have themes and topics that challenge market norms and use AI to expand your thoughts? I think where we're seeing challenges is on the flip side, where you have pressure from boards, senior executives, non-marketers, to say, "Hey, like, cut X amount of your staff and just replace them with Chat GPT," and you're creating sort of generic sludge at scale, and you wonder why your experience is tanking and your leads are trash, and kind of go down that list. So, to your point, knowing how to use this in the right way to enhance original thoughts and scale, apply research to do some of the lower tasks. Think about using AI to distribute your thoughts in ways that you couldn't before, or personalize them in different ways. So I think that's super important, and it's not as widely known, especially as you get into a lot of the tools that are coming to market today, which are kind of the promise of them are wonderful, right? You're like, "Oh, I can hit a button and now like Jeff doesn't have to write a blog anymore." You're like, "Not exactly." you know?
Not exactly.
Yeah. So I think that's important, and it's a really nice call out. And when you understand how to work differently, when you have this calculator, so to speak, and how you need to change, and the role of yourself and your teams start to change. So, as you've started to do this work and you're not spending months doing research, and you're not spending, hours or potentially a week trying to create derivative content, how has that changed your time, your schedule, and your team schedule? Has that fundamentally changed any aspects of how you run your team?
I'd say it's been an inverse relationship. So before we were heavy on, and I don't want to use the word grunt work as a bad phrase. It's not, but there's a lot of grunt work, and then you get to think. Here, you get to do a lot more thinking with AI. So if you imagine, it's like using a power tool, if you use a power tool to nail up a wall or whatever and put drywall up versus taking a hammer and a nail and doing them one at a time. It's just removing a lot of what I would call the lower value work and allows you to invest in the higher value work, which is the ability to think through what you're doing strategically, why it matters, how you can differentiate yourself in the marketplace. So you tend to spend 80% of your time producing the material and then 20% of the time trying to figure it out. We here, in some ways, what AI can do is dramatically reduce that 80% down. So even if you double the amount of time you can use to think about what you're doing, how can you change what you do, how you do it, where are the opportunities, even thinking beyond where you would have been in the prior situation without AI, you're now breaking new ground. And I push everyone on my team. I tell them you have to be using AI. You have to be experimenting with it. And what I view AI is as would be a tool to help me grow my team without having to hire as many people. And that's not bad. People can have job enrichment, they can have greater scope of responsibility, and I don't need to hire as many people because the productivity goes up dramatically. So there's a trade off. There might be some industries where AI can have a huge impact, but I always viewed this like I did with the web. When the web started, everyone's, oh, there's going to be no customer service agents. Everyone's going to go online. Everyone's going to lose their jobs in the service centers. No, you may not have to hire as many people to perform customer service, but you're still going to need them, especially in a business that's growing. But what you allow your customer service people to do is become better at delivering customer service and delivering on the brand promise of whether it be quality service or help and guidance in using the product.
It's an incredibly important point. I think as you start to consider, are we even doing the right work? And because of the volume of tasks that have been relegated to us as marketing, kind of, I think to your one of your very early points, it's part of the reason marketing got devalued, because as a leader, you're looking and you're like, all these people are spending their time doing quote unquote, some of the downstream grunt work, and it's not producing enough value. It's not happening fast enough. Why do we have so many people? What are they doing? What is the value back? So you start asking those questions, and then it starts to put a question mark around the value of marketing, especially if you're not a marketing first person, right? So I think what's most exciting here is if we can start scaling and automating some of the downstream tasks and really thinking strategically, then marketing has no question marks around it, right? Because it's hyper strategic, it's tied to the business goals of the organization, it's delivering results, and it's scaling in ways that are unique and exciting, but only if you use it in the right ways, right? So if you're using it to chase some downstream cost reduction or just headcounts, and you're not thinking of it as a strategic growth apparatus, then you're in trouble, right? So I think starting to think about what's required in today's environment, it's not just I can do the same job with less people. It's I can do a different job, right? Like the job that's been neglected for the last 5, 6, 10 years because the workload's been too high.
Yeah, that's a really good point. People should realize that it's not about the, expense reduction side to it. It's about the growth side to the equation and how I can take my job to the next level. When I hire someone, I tell them that this job, which I'm going to fully empower you on, should not be the same job it is in a year from now and a year after that, and give people the opportunity to grow in a job. I look at AI as a very important tool to help people accelerate what they do and how they do it. And by really shedding some of that more mundane, not value added pieces, and you convert that into how do I think about my job? How can I influence, what we're doing, how it impacts the company? That becomes a whole different paradigm and it becomes interesting. And for marketers, where I always joke, oh, we marketers make pretty things, right? Oh, they look at the colors, they do color palettes and things like that. No, marketing's about helping engage customers, engage your business partners internally. It helps drive the business forward. And some companies, marketing is the lead organization, and other companies, it's more of a support component. But no matter what side of the continuum you're on, based on the culture you're in, marketing can have an incredible amount of value. You just have to know how to pull the right levers, and AI to me it's a guaranteed way of improving performance, building credibility, and helping you really enhance your job. But it's not a silver bullet for everything, right? Because AI can give you funky answers. I learned from our tech partners inside the company, my colleagues, hallucinations, toxicity, it could make stuff up. So that's where the prompting becomes really important, where you have to tell it not to, I mean, you literally tell it not to make stuff up. Only give me facts that you can quantify. And I always ask it, I'm talking about like the person, but I always ask AI to validate what it's coming back to me um, with references. Please cite the work. If you're going to give me growth projections in the market, where are you getting the data from? And limit it to what you can actually find, and don't infer on any of the information you're giving me. So prompting becomes really, really important. I'd recommend people, play around with it, or even you can ask, you know, ChatGPT how to do better prompting, and it will tell you how to do better prompting. So if you get good at that, it makes it a bit easier. And I actually find myself asking people questions and conversations a bit better because I use AI, which is weird, but it's make me a better question asker in person when I'm in person.
That's funny. It also is funny. So we have built a solution for marketers that largely follows that logic, where we have human created content that either we or our brands create on behalf of them, and then say, do not stray from this. And if you're going to add to it, do these things. And also like, hey, can you do a really good job because my job's on the line on this piece, and it actually comes out better, which is crazy and really funny. But to your point, really starting to understand how to work these things and even the different strengths and weaknesses. We're mentioning GBT a lot, but as you think of the different platforms, what they're some are good at and others are. We've been talking a lot about the financial return of some of these marketing activities, but I also know that you've put a premium on the customer relationship and customer value throughout your career. AI can really be a tool to cut costs or drive efficiencies and things like that. But where do you see the value in creating deeper customer relationships with the value of AI? Like, how do you kind of tie those two together?
I think it helps you create more insights faster, and you can test things out with AI. So that's one aspect. The other aspect, as we start to get into lead gen, and I don't have too many details about the models we plan on building here, is how do you take all of the data you have out there in terms of contact points, engagement points, conversion points, by product, by market, by industry, by job title, and actually take that and consolidate that down into learnings. So to me, AI can single handedly take these complex relationships and draw out conclusions and observations that may not be so easy. I'll give you an example, not by my company, but I read somewhere, and it must have been a medical journal, where doctors taught the computers to look for cancer markers in breast cancer. So the machines were really, really good at identifying the markers that identified breast cancer. And it actually, machine learning, actually came up with two markers that doctors never recognized before. So not only did it learn, but it actually educated the teachers on new markers that are a sign of cancer that were unknown to them before. So if you shift into marketing and you take that paradigm, AI is going to draw observations that probably were not obvious. And it's redundant to say, obviously, it's obvious what's obvious, but it's not obvious. These nuggets of wealth that you can uncover by observation, and what AI can do is really filter through a lot of information, so that when we go to the market and we want to engage someone, you can literally take the right type of content for that particular person in that particular industry, in that particular region, with some understanding of what's important to them. And you can create content. And Skyward, huge on content and content development. You can imagine surgically placing content in a very dynamic way in real time. And we've always talked about getting the right message at the right time on the right device to the right person. Well, AI not only can do that, but it can actually tell you where the additional opportunities are. And again, it's a two-way street. You have to digest and understand the data, understand the information. You can't just assume whatever you're hearing from the models, it's correct. You have to test it, and you go back to some old-fashioned methods of going out there, do some testing, maybe A/B testing, maybe do some lookalike marketing, or do remarketing to people who may not have, decided to click on that ad the first time, see what the results are, see what the behavior changes are. So it's a great tool. But it's got to be used, in relationship to everything else you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think as a industry, we've been talking to you about personalization forever, and I think the barrier to actually proper personalization has been scaled content, right? Because you start building all these tools, and you're like, oh, we can surface content based on this behavior, and you're like, cool, but where's like the 57,000 variations of that content to actually deliver that last mile experience? It didn't exist. So now that it does, that sort of promise is starting to materialize. But to your point, um, it has to be good. It has to be interesting. It has to be thought provoking, because as we start moving through and building this infrastructure, what you say, how you say it, who you say it to, and at what point, like all that stuff starts to matter. But for the first time, we can actually do it right if done the right way. When you look at kind of to that point, your understanding of customer expectations of brands and their experiences that they're providing, how is that changing as we're starting to see this world grow up? And what is the risk of not doing a good job? And I think the not doing a good job falls in two categories. One is this vanilla, generic, semi hallucinated content that's AI generated, or on the opposite side, to your point, retreating for the hills and totally running away from it and just not participating. Like, what is the danger of those two things? And, what is the opportunity of doing it right? And what does that look like?
Yeah, I think there's more risk than opportunity by not doing it. You mentioned your generic content. People, on one hand, say, "Give me something of value. Act like you know me." And then they get freaked out when you act like you know them. It's really a catch-22. That's kind of freaky. How did you know that? I mean, I talk in my house, and then all of a sudden I'm seeing ads about what I just talked about coming up on my phone. So I know, even though I try to turn certain things off, someone's listening to what I'm talking about, because it's not random that, a particular product I was talking about is now showing up in my offers, both on my computer and on my phone. So I would say that there's got to be a combination of, you have to experiment. You can't just throw money out there and hope something hits. And it's not like a spray and pray. I would start with your business model, because nothing changes. You're trying to engage customers. That's never going to change. That's the overlying theme, right? You either want to get new customers, keep the ones you have, or grow wallet share. So when people tell me, what do you want to do or what's important, those three things probably are always at the top of the list of any company, anyone in the company. They want more customers. They want to grow their wallet share and retain them. So you have to start where you are and build out as a starting point from what you're doing today. Use new tools, new use capabilities, and extend that model out to see if you can do better at what you're doing today.
All right, Jeff. So you wrote a book, Advice to My Younger Self, a common sense guide to navigating your career, available on Amazon. Maybe, Jeff, you can hold up the cover here. What prompted you to write the book?
I wanted to help people is the bottom line. So I've had many moments in my career where if I could go back and redo it, I would have done it. Those cringeworthy moments. And so what I wanted to do is put together some, again, common sense approaches to how to manage a career. Listen with the intent to understand, find your advocates, always invest in yourself, things like that. Find some uh, work life balance. And I've done a few presentations and book signings, and I have a small presentation I put together. And the last slide of it is a tombstone that says I could have worked more hours. And so I remind people that, life is more than just work, but you need to find that right mix. One of the chapters I like the most is that I call it the need want matrix. And so what happens, you might be good at something. And so the scale, low and high, and you might like what you're doing, low and high. So if you don't like what you're doing and you're not good at it, you can throw that out the door. If you're really good at something that you enjoy, home run. But what happens when you're not good at something you love, or you're good at something you hate? What do you do? Right? Because, you know, just quitting a job may not be the answer. You want to be passionate about what you do, but yet also have to be somewhat grounded in reality. You can't quit your job. As great as that sounds, it's not a movie where someone quits their job and all of a sudden they step into some sort of new thing and they become a billionaire and they're
I
flying
mean,
around the world.
Jerry Maguire is not real life. Is that?
It's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I wrote the book to help people. I work for some very talented executives. I learned a lot from them, and I just want to pass on that knowledge. And occasionally I'll get a note every now and then. Someone found the book somehow, and they, say, "Hey, this is great. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed reading your book." And, if I could help people, why not?
I think what was interesting to me is this moment we're in. It's almost like we're all sort of relegated back to being students again, right? So we're looking at this world that's changing. To your point, and we have to be curious and we have to learn. So as leaders, when you think about some of the principles that you pass on to your younger self, if you were to apply this to the next book, which is your future self, what are some of the learnings that leaders could take on to say like, hey, there's almost like a reboot moment for business and marketing? And what are some of the things that I need, some of the key principles or work habits or things that I should be doing to be successful, to your point, so you don't look back and be like, man, I missed the boat in this key moment.
And that's actually a future chapter if I update the book, if I see my future self. So
There
I
you
have
go.
both covered,
You're welcome. Yeah.
in the past. That I'll have to send you a commission. Yeah. So I would say there are a couple of things that, whether you're at the front end of your career, middle or end, be curious. Always think, how do the pieces fit together? How do things work? How do things operate? I always like to tinker with things and try to figure that out. So there's a curiosity level that's really important. And when you're a leader, that could apply more to how do I get my team empowered? How do I give them the tools? How do I step back and let them be successful? Because I tell my team all the time, every one of you should be out much smarter than I am in what you do, right? I'm here to help you grow. I'll give you the tools, I'll give you the support, but you're a master of what you do and you're going to teach me. And that does come down to certain things that have to be done, like being curious, being engaged, partnering with people. I think there's also, for me, a natural need to want to learn. I want to expand what I'm doing and how I do it. So every job I took, I was always looking at how can I evolve this job to the next level. And sometimes I'd go off too far and I have to be pulled back and say, Jeff, that's great, but we're not going to solve, world hunger, in your job. Let's focus on what we have to get done. So stay focused, but be curious, be engaged. And I would say, as in my book, I talk about continuous learning. No one is responsible for your career development except for you. And never stop learning. I'm taking classes on AI through Trailhead on Salesforce. So I'm learning a level of AI I probably never need to know, but I want to learn it and I want to understand it better. And I think it makes me a better leader. And it makes me, my curiosity makes me really interested in continuing to look for those opportunities to educate myself in areas I may not be as strong in. And in this case, I'm going to rely on more of my team to bring that stuff forward. And so anyway, I would say be curious, be engaged. Those are two ingredients that just naturally make you someone who's going to, take advantage of situations, grow in your job, grow professionally.
As you're looking at staying educated and being curious, and particularly around AI, you mentioned Salesforce as a great resource for that. Are there any other resources that you are kind of your go tos that you like to learn, grow, and develop?
Yeah, Coursera is something that I would recommend. And there's so much out there. It's like everything else. Find what's right for you. I actually was recommending someone recommended me go check out Trailhead because there were so many. And I went to someone who knows AI extremely well. And I asked him, what tool, where should I go? And so he said, try Trailhead. That was really a good one. And I've liked it. And you know what? If you're not sure, go ask AI. They'll have plenty of answers for you. You won't come up short on responses and tools, but it's like everything else, there's such a proliferation now of tools and capabilities. And when I'm on Instagram, you get these posts that show like the top 10, AI tools you should be using. So I have a collection of pictures because I screenshot those and I have about 400 different AI tools I should be using. So yeah, it is wild. So I would pick a few. If they work, stick to them. If not, dabble in other areas and see what works for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of getting back to the tenor and the tone of this conversation, which is, how do we think of AI as an enhancement to what we do? I think there's a lot of companies that specialize in different aspects of that. So whether a company like ours that's focused on expert content creation at scale, or productivity tools, or learning, or this the whole agent world that is now emerging and kind of playing around with those elements. The world is changing and evolving, and I think getting ahead of that as much as you can, but focusing on partners to help kind of level you up and educate you along the way becomes really important as well. To close out, I'd love to get a sense of where you think we are in this sort of transformation cycle as we're looking to implement AI, and also like what gets you most excited about the future, and that future might be 2025, but it also could be beyond that.
Oh, that's a great question. I think we're early on in AI. I don't think we're early on in acknowledging that AI is here and we have to leverage it. I think what you're going to start to see now are tools and companies that are coming to market, some of these startups creating some very interesting applications. And you'll probably have AI lead gen companies, AI brand companies, AI content generation companies. all of that, I think, will start to unfold like we've seen in the web and we've seen with different technology waves. I think you'll start to see that the tools, the capabilities, people will become more comfortable. And that will, I think, be where you see things going. I'm excited what AI can do. I mean, AI to me would be the probably crown jewel of my excitement because it allows me to do my job better. It empowers my people and it lets us do things that just were not possible prior to having tools like AI. I would, caveat what I've said earlier. You have to be careful. I think it was Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. So it's very powerful. The tool, you could almost be seduced by the power of what it can do and start to forget that you really need to make sure what you're looking at, how it's operating, is validated, is proven. Just don't trust, the new tool, but leverage it and integrate it into what you're doing. It's not a replacement of, right? So your outcomes are always the same. They've been the same for hundreds of years. You want to grow your business, you want to make more money, you want to bring in new clients, you want to keep the ones you have. All of those core attributes or outcomes have never changed. It's the tools and techniques that have changed. AI is the latest in that, and we've had, whether it be the web, whether it be site optimization tools, whether it be cloud marketing tools from Adobe or Salesforce. Those tools just help you do a better job at growing your business. And I think AI is probably the newest. I'd like to say maybe the most dynamic until something more dynamic comes along. And that does excite me because I can tell you today, right now, I am doing things that probably, I wouldn't say that would be impossible to do, but it would have taken a lot of effort to do. And so now I think I'm getting a lot more horsepower, you know, than I used to, and being able to focus more on how I can help my business and my colleagues grow, our business is really what becomes the exciting part. Before, getting back to someone could take weeks, months, whatever, or maybe not get back to someone. But now I'm actually bringing new thoughts and opportunities to the table. So it's fun to be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to that point, really starting to move beyond what is this explosion of hype and excitement and curiosity. Obviously, those things are still there, but starting to get to the value realization, which is really interesting, at least from my purview. I think as you start to maybe see some consolidation, hopefully soon. So there's just not so many. You don't have 400 pictures of tools that you have to try, like which obviously you could never try, right? And you don't know what you're opening yourself up to now saying like, okay, cool. Like Jeff has tried a bunch of these tools and started to see which ones actually work and create productivity versus noise and smoke and mirrors. And also like as an industry and as a just as an economy, we're starting to utilize these to do a different style of work, which is cool. So, kind of running to some of those principles, like how can I use these tools not to automate high thought tasks, but to allow me to move faster and, some of those like replicable tasks over and over again that are lower thought that can, if I were able to do those things faster, I could produce way better work at a higher scale and get better outcomes. So I think, we're starting to get to that place. I think the last year and a half has been wild, exhausting, exciting, all those things. But the dust seemingly is starting to settle into a future that we all can start to operate in, which is very, very cool. So, Jeff, really appreciate your perspectives. Awesome conversation. Really enjoyed it. And thanks for sharing all your knowledge.
Thank you, Dan. I really enjoyed having the conversation and chatting more about where we are and what the future may hold.
We'll see. All right, Jeff. Thanks again. Thank you for listening to Content Disrupted, brought to you by Skyward. To stay up to date on the latest ideas and insights in brand building and content marketing, visit our website at skyward.com. That's skyword.com. Join us for our next episode, where we'll continue to challenge marketing norms and inspire you with fresh strategies for growing business through brand storytelling.